Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Society of Ridgewood. My name is Carayannis, and I'm usually behind the scenes trying to make the Zoom machines function properly, but today I will be doing both. So just bear with us if there's any technical difficulties, and I thank you for your patience. Unitarian Universalism is a religion of care and community, of promise and covenant. We do not ask folks to believe in any one particular thing about the nature of God or humanity. We have no particular dogma or creed, but we do ask each other to think about who we want to be and how we want to be in this world. We ask each other to embrace hope, the power of love, and the possibility of change. We are committed to increasing justice, love, and compassion. We acknowledge what is hard and needs changing, and we rejoice in what is beautiful and wonderful. This morning, we have a special announcement. A few weeks ago, Reverend Sarah shared with us a reading of a stirring poem by the Ukrainian poet Ilya Kaminsky, "We Lived Happily During the War." The poem speaks of some of the frustrations and guilt we feel as spectators in the terrible human tragedy happening in Ukraine. Many have asked, what can we do? How can we channel our despair? One way is to turn our despair on its head by reminding ourselves of the millions of people around the world who have awakened to a dedication to peace, compassion, and love in response to the war. Another way is to support our own Unitarian Universalist Service Committee Emergency Response Fund to ensure that UUSC is always ready to provide relief, including work to protect the rights of Ukrainian refugees. UUSC's first step is to send emergency relief funding to groups who are working on the ground in Eastern Europe, such as the Hungarian Helsinki Committee, who is already providing free legal assistance, counseling, and representation so that Ukrainian asylum seekers receive temporary protection immediately. Other local partners assist communities that are often overlooked when tragedy strikes and who center the needs of those most impacted in their response. So on the screen is how to give to the UUSC. If you are new to USR and want to know more about who we are and what we do, the best thing is to get connected to our weekly e-blast. A Google form link will be dropped into the chat for folks on Zoom. Just click on that link and fill out the form. We will also drop the email contact for our congregational administrator Ann there. For folks here, we invite you to stay on after service ends for our coffee hour. For folks on Zoom, we invite you to stay for our breakout room coffee hour so you can get to know some other folks in a very low pressure setting. So again, we welcome those of you who are joining us online and also those of you who have joined us here in Anderson. It is good to be with you this morning. I now ask you to join us in the words for lighting our chalice. The words can be found on the screen. We light this chalice for the light of truth, the warmth of love, and the energy of action as we gather together in the circle of community. Now, let us take a breath. Arrive in this place, our sanctuary, this space that has taken up our attention Sunday after Sunday, sometimes from afar, sometimes even at great distances. Let us hold this space, pushing out the other noise just to be here. Let this space hold us, knowing we are here, we are safe, We are in the presence of love. Listen to this tone and arrive. Here in Anderson, we hear the birds outside. Spring has arrived. This morning, we're going to be turning our attention to trans kids. Trans people the world over are terribly discriminated against, and we often think of adults in this category. And it is easy to forget that every trans adult was once a trans kid. There is anti-trans litigation in over 29 states across America right now, and there are many more to come. In Texas in particular, but in Idaho soon to follow, these policies target trans kids. So I do have a content warning for you this morning. During the service, I will be speaking about the idea of suicide. I do not dwell on the details, but to not speak of it while talking about this issue would be to do a great violence. But in all of this tumult, in all of this fear, and in all of the calls for action, I want to offer for us today words from Ursula K. Le Guin's translation of the Tao Te Ching. What's perfectly whole seems flawed, but you can use it forever. What's perfectly full seems empty, but you cannot use it up. True straightness looks crooked. Great skill looks clumsy. Real eloquence seems to stammer. To be comfortable in the cold, keep moving. To be comfortable in the heat, keep still. To be comfortable in the world, stay calm and still. We now turn to a testimonial from Kate Ireland.
Hi, my name is Kate Ireland. I have been a USR member for, I think, about a year. Probably started showing up, I don't know, COVID years don't feel real, so 3 years ago maybe. I've been involved this year and last year with the youth at USR, so the teens and the really little ones between first grade to fifth grade. I'm constantly invited to be involved in things, which I love about USR. I've had the opportunity to be involved in a covenant group, a lot of different just little things, even just conversational groups at a coffee hour. Always invited, always feel included, which I love. Really what drew me in about USR in general and Unitarian Universalism in general was it's like a conscious effort to be inclusive and to be kind. You see some of the routines that I saw in Catholicism growing up, but it's never routine. It's always a conscious effort to be learning and growing. It seems like everyone I've met is constantly learning and growing, and it's so unusual, to meet a whole community of people who are committed to learning and growing their whole lives. So it's just really nice. I'm sorry, my cat is trying to interact. It's just really nice to be in a community like that and to surround myself, even if it's just once a week, even if it's once a month, with people who really make an effort to be kind, involving, caring, inclusive, and growing. So I've met so many people who within minutes felt connected with them at coffee hour or anywhere else. it's been really amazing. And it's, even with COVID, I've been able to make new friends and grow really close with people, surprisingly, in short amounts of time. So I really love it. I would be surprised if anyone who came here didn't love something about it. So you should support it. Thanks for listening.
So, as a community, it is important that we take time to honor all that we bring to this space. Here, we hold each other in our fullness. In the web of interconnection, we support each other through the heartaches and the joys because each of us matter, and all of us deserve to be loved and cared for. So, it is right then to pause now and for us to share what is on our hearts together. So if you're online, please take this time to share in the chat. If you are in person, know that each and every week you are invited to submit a prayer request on the back table or at the entryway, I suppose. And those will be collected and brought forward. You can also log on to Zoom right now if you would like and enter them into the chat directly, which I will see here. And so first, I would invite you to share any sorrows, the hardships, the losses, the griefs, the anxiety. Maybe the loss of a loved one has weighed on you. Maybe you're feeling especially alone this week. Maybe your relationship is ended, or just the weight of oppression is feeling really heavy. Janice is praying for a friend, Alfredo, who fell last week and broke his hip and resides at Nyack Hospital. Please, please.
I'm thinking this week about two friends of mine. They're a gay couple, and they were the victims of verbal assault, highly anti-gay, totally unnecessary, because the issue that this person had with them had nothing to do with the fact that they're gay. But still, that's what this person had. Made me very angry and sad.
Thank you. Kirsten is having a stent procedure tomorrow. Let's hold Kirsten in our thoughts. A member has low-grade lower back pain that has flared this week, and they need to spend a couple of hours flat on their back with their legs raised this morning. Please.
I'd like to ask for your prayers, your thoughts. My father passed away in February. We're doing a memorial service this weekend. Spoke with my mom this morning. She's really struggling with the road ahead. I have my own struggles with it, but please keep her in your prayers.
Thank you. Please. Thank you. I now invite you to share those joys or birthdays or gratitudes or happy thoughts and life moments that you bring with you today. Carol is celebrating Bill's 60th birthday today. They're hoping to go for a hike. Jan is happy to be taking her 92-year-old mom to lunch today. Peggy had the joy of attending the beautiful concert given by Purdue Varsity Glee Club at the Riverside Church. It was very uplifting in this time of anxiety and despair. Someone says, Martin, I have been thrilled to learn this week that today the equinox is the most important day of the year in both the Persian and Aztec calendars. We're always learning here. Please.
Maybe Thursday to go to Florida and celebrate my father's
90th
90th birthday.
birthday, wow.
So yesterday I turned 70, which is very nice, but I want you to know that 10 years ago when I turned 60, I had a big dash right across the street. People that were there, it was a lot of fun, so just a good connection.
That's wonderful.
I'm looking very much forward to getting together with a high school classmate of mine next Sunday, for dinner, right after the concert that several of us will be singing in at the Bethlehem Lutheran Church right across the way. And I was just thinking as I was driving, I see that friend periodically, not often, but periodically, because she does live in New Jersey. And I was just thinking how much I'm looking forward to seeing her again and catching up with her. And the older I get, the more these friendships, even the longest of friendships, need to.
Ronald and my granddaughter was 11 on Thursday, and she celebrated an adult wedding. She had her first sleepover.
Wow.
She's our little Jewish Puerto Rican born on St. Patty's Day. So we should change your name to Okola.
Please.
Concerts that were canceled in 2020 and 2021 are starting to come back with a vengeance.
Yeah.
So I was on a plane for the first time in 2.5 years the other day. Yay! It was actually good to be on a plane. And I'm singing in Carnegie Hall next Sunday. And our little Annie is driving.
We hold in our hearts all of these feelings and experiences, the heartbreak, the fear, the hope, the courage. We also hold all of what was not spoken today, but is still in our hearts and is just as real. May we remember that even though we are apart in body, we are never alone in spirit, that tomorrow is always a new day, that hope is always around the corner, that you are worthy of love and are deeply loved no matter what. May it be so, and amen. Are you singing the hymn? Oh. We can improv and skip it.
Meditation.
Yes, there is a hymn. How would anyone?
Oh,
It's
absolutely.
53.
Great.
But do you want to do a meditation?
Right, yeah. That's a good point. I skipped ahead on the script. I'm going to do the meditation first, then we're going to do the hymn. Sound good? Okay.
Didn't you write this?
I wrote this. Did I review it?
It's great to have you back. That's it.
Okay, so I'm going to invite us into the meditation space. So just get comfortable, whatever that is for you today. And today I'm going to ask us to do something slightly unconventional for USR. We are talking today about children, and for me, I cannot think of listening to children without thinking of Fred Rogers, who is better known as Mr. Rogers. And so today I want to quote and follow a practice started by Mr. Rogers when he won his Lifetime Achievement Award at the Oscars. And he used it as an opportunity for all of us to sit in silence and reflect on the meaningful people in our lives. And so he said, "Some of you are here, some of you are far away, some are even in heaven. All of us have special ones who have loved us into being. Would you just take, along with me, 1 minute to think of the people who have helped you become who you are, those who have cared about you and wanted what was best for you in life? I will keep the time." Whomever you've been thinking about, how pleased they must be to know the difference you feel that they have made. Thank you. The word
Should we rise?
if you would like to rise in body or spirit.
Please rise to sing our hymn, number 1053. How could anyone ever tell you are anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you are less than more?
Hi, I'm Jack Lohr, Vice President for the board at USR, coming to you by recording. Happy vernal equinox. Before I do the offering, a couple of announcements. Next week, 5 of our young people will be headed with their leaders to Boston for a UU faith pilgrimage. They'll be touching the roots of Unitarianism and Universalism, the vibrant abolitionist movement of Boston, the intersecting points of early American history with our faith, and the mystical soul of UU, transcendentalism. Our hopes and best wishes go with them. The art and racial justice teams invite you to a Zoom meeting with art-curious podcaster Jennifer DeSalle to explore the life of trailblazing sculptor Edmonia Lewis, Monday, March 28, 7:30 p.m. Third Wednesday Covenant Group has room for you. To register or for information about Covenant Groups, please contact B. Cronin. USR is hosting the UU Faith Action Gala 2022 on Saturday, April 9th at 6 p.m. in person and virtually. Celebrate embracing resiliency. Northern New Jersey Now hosts a panel of Asian American women connecting their culture to their vision of a just society. USR's social justice team is a co-sponsor. March 30th, 7 p.m. Our Grow Back Better pledge campaign on Friday had reached $193,385. That's more than a third of the way to our goal, thanks to all who have responded. Thanks to our February Reed Porch collection, $228 and 46 bags of groceries were donated to the Center for Food Action. Way to go. All this month, we share half of our plate offering with the New Jersey Abortion Access Fund. We are proud to support this volunteer agency doing the important work of securing reproductive justice. You know that one of the promises we make to each other in our shared covenant at USR is to support this congregation with our presence, gifts, and service, and to care for each other and the long-term well-being of our community. This is the time in our service when we put that promise into action by reminding each other that we share a vision of justice and freedom for this world, and that it will take all our different talents, gifts, and support to make that vision a reality. The offering will now be given and gratefully received. Thank you.
I usually play this special music before the sermon so that, if the reading's particularly emotional, I can gather myself. But both the music and the reading were particularly emotional, so still gathering myself. So the high school in my small town that I had grown up in had a gay-straight alliance. Now, I obviously joined. The Gay-Straight Alliance was the closest thing to an LGBTQIA group for teens that middle America in the early 2000s could stomach. So for context, the year I joined, Friends was the most watched show on television. And one of the running jokes in that show was the insinuation that any one of the male characters were either gay or effeminate. One of the characters' parents was a trans woman who was the constant butt of every joke, and the implication was that because of this, that character was either the most effeminate or had difficult psychological difficulties. So it was not uncommon at this time to hear the word gay used to describe things that our peers generally did not like. Strawberry Pop-Tarts, the locker combination, that person over there. And it was not uncommon to hear adults use the word either. Gay was so stigmatized that people would react violently to being called it. And trans identities weren't even on the radar. We actually had a campaign to try to educate folks of the harmful effects of the use of gay slurs a full 7 years before the national campaign to, quote unquote, think before you speak. Little did we know that 20 years later, Florida would pass a bill commonly referred to as the Don't Say Gay bill, but it would have very different ramifications. So in a school of about 2,000, about 10 or 15 teens would gather in the heart of the counseling center every week. Some of us were very out, some were not, some were only out in that group, some were allies, and some just didn't know what they were. The counselor who brought the group together, Mr. Metcalf, would only join when invited and then only to facilitate projects, provide information, or anything like that. Other than that, he left our group in our hands. It was only years later I learned how much emotional, intellectual, and really just pure organizational work that Mr. Metcalf did to keep this space open for us. Everything from keeping our identities and orientations private, from the administration to absorbing angry parents who learned that their child was queer and believed that the school was somehow responsible for this tragedy. One student in the group ran away from home because his parents rejected him so thoroughly, and at least one of us did not make it to adulthood. And if not for this group, I firmly believe it would have been more. Suicide is the second leading cause of death among LGBTQI children, and this is drastically reduced when these children are in supportive environments. And you see, what Mr. Metcalf did was just listen to his students. He listened to them when the mainstream culture around him wanted him to ignore them. He listened to them in their pain and in their joy. He listened to them, he took them seriously, and then he held the space. Now, this term is often used today so much that it starts to lose its meaning, so I want to be very specific. He held the space in an active way. He literally shut out all of the noise from outside, including his own. He could have inserted himself into the group, given his 2 cents every time we met, made us feel or know his fight on the outside, but he did not. He held the space and let us have it. And he also held the space in the sense of embracing us. In that room, during that time, 90% of what we did was just screw around like kids, in the freedom of not having to worry that some adult or some other kid would attack us for who we were, even though most of us still lacked the clarity of what exactly that was. Mr. Metcalf saved lives by listening to children and giving them space to listen to each other. Now, if he was working in Texas today, he would likely be under criminal investigation for not reporting child abuse. This is because the governor of Texas, Governor Abbott, signed an executive order that said that trans kids being provided with gender-affirming care is child abuse, and as a mandatory reporter, it is counselors' jobs to report that child abuse to the Department of Family Services. This affects at least 120,000 families and their caretakers, and they were all criminalized with the stroke of a pen for loving their children and listening to their children. And these news stories are easy to ignore. It is happening in a state that we often think of as having regressive policies. It is a complicated issue that affects a very small portion of society, and it involves medical sciences. But perhaps the reason it is most easy to ignore is that it involves trans folks, and they are often not listened to, and it involves children who are also often not listened to, at least not on a national stage. It is also true that there is so much misinformation as to what gender-affirming care is that unless you are very focused on this issue, it is easy just to assume we know what it means. So often when we hear this phrase, gender-affirming care, we automatically think about genitals and surgery. And when we think of that related to children, we almost always shy away. We think they can wait to adulthood to make such big decisions. Our mind goes to genitals because of years of media conditioning. And honestly, this is wild to me. Society has thousands of characteristics that they use to determine the sex of somebody, and all but one of those indicators involves seeing someone naked. Face shape, voice depth, hair, hand size, foot size, clothing, your gait. 1,000 indicators of sex that we are projecting onto everyone that we meet, and we do it almost automatically without ever having seen them naked. And because all of this is so prone to misinterpretation, I would like to just broadly clarify and talk about what gender-affirming care is. So for children pre-puberty, gender-affirming care simply means respecting who they are, providing them with a supportive environment, calling them by their name, calling them by their pronouns, giving them access to spaces often barred by the gender binary, letting them wear the clothes they want. That's it. By the time puberty comes, the treatment is puberty-suppressing drugs. These have been commonly used for children for a variety of needs for a long time and properly monitored by health professionals. These are very safe. Should the child stop taking them, they will go through puberty normally. As the child gets older, more towards the 18-year range, there are hormone replacement treatments, medications, and pills that one might take. Puberty causes changes to the body which are not only psychologically painful to the child, but are also only reversible through surgery, voice training, and quite honestly, probably magic. The risk of not providing these children with this care is depression, anxiety, suicide, gastrointestinal diseases, and an adulthood of surgeries that could have been avoided. The risk of providing this care is delayed puberty. Surgeries are really only an option to adults, and I want to be clear, there are many trans folks that never seek this type of medical treatment. The most common hand-wringing among the cis community, and cis comes from the Latin to mean same or the same gender that one was assigned at birth. It's not an acronym and it's not a slur as the internet will try to convince you. But the most common hand-wringing comes from what is known as detransitioning. That is somebody who has transitioned to another gender and then transitioned back. And there are really three things I want to say about this. First is that it's incredibly rare, with estimates as low as 0.5%. Second is that many report that they detransitioned because of the overwhelming amount of transphobia that they encountered. And last is that we need to destigmatize detransitioning as much as we need to destigmatize transitioning. Figuring out who we are is not a straight line, and no one should be ashamed for their journey. So the first step we can take in protecting trans kids is demystifying the care options available to them. We ask a lot of trans children. We ask that they become biological experts. We ask that they become actively involved in their care. We ask that they learn more about human anatomy than most adults know. And because of transphobia, we now ask them to become legal experts and philosophers, and all of this just to exist as themselves. And the medical community is overwhelmingly in support of this course of treatment, by the way. The American Medical Association, the American Psychiatric Association, and the American Academy of Pediatrics all agree that this is the right and proper course of action. But just because in having this conversation that we have to rely on medical experts to place their stamp of approval on it, let us make no mistakes. These medical professionals learned this from listening to trans children. They learned this from the bravery of these children and from the years of listening to them. And to believe that these lessons stopped yesterday is to do a disservice to our society. Jules Gills Peterson, she's a professor of gender studies in Pittsburgh and author of the book, A History of Transgender Identities, tells us the following. A lot of times when we're talking about trans kids, the whole issue comes down to gender. And my response is often, actually, no. The problem here is our conception of childhood. We treat them differently. Of course, there are differences between adults and children, but I think we have to pay attention to when that presumed difference is being utilized to ignore something. And here's what's so incredible about a trans kid. You have a young person who, without any conception or support, has figured this thing out about themselves. This profound thing. You know, kids don't go to school and learn how to think critically about their gender identity. They have to teach it to themselves. And so I think by the point a child comes to us and says, hey, I'm a girl, or I'm a boy, or whatever, they've already proven to us that they do know what they're talking about, because it just takes so much work to figure that out. The emotional issue is in adults. We are the ones that get anxious. I talk to a lot of parents. Most of them don't have transphobic responses, but most of them are responding out of fear. They want what's best for their kid, and now they're confused. But by the time the trans kid has come to us with their identity, they've done all the hard work. It's the adults who have to play catch up. Too often we allow an idea to take the place of a person. The proponents of these bills that are in 29 states, claim to be protecting children from gender ideology, which wants kids, and they just want kids to be kids. Which kids are they worried about? In 2001, the UUA, which is the umbrella organization for the UU congregations, issued a scathing statement against anti-trans policies, calling these policies, quote, using false notions of religious freedom and protecting women and children as an excuse for discrimination. The proponents of these bills have turned these children's identities into an ideology that can then be debated. And I'm contending that this is not a debate. I want us to think of their experience. I want us to listen to them. So a child who spends who knows how long teaching themselves about their relationship to their sex. They see something that doesn't seem right, and they do the super difficult work of introspection without a society that is immediately open to this or who readily provides them with these resources. They do all of this work and come to an answer. Then after having done this work, they bravely face their parent or their guardian and they say, I'm a boy, I'm a girl, I don't really think I'm either. The immediate response of their parent is likely one of confusion and maybe even an entirely imperfect response because they're caught off guard and they exist in the same society that does not offer them the tools to easily have this conversation. It's hard at first, the child being so vulnerable and brave and the guardian being so lost and scared, but they do some research with each other. They find some places like the Trevor Project, and they connect this child with peers like them because this child has likely never met another trans person in their life. It is incredibly lonely being trans. Then they begin speaking with their pediatrician, and it's hard to find a doctor who is not explicitly or implicitly transphobic. It is endemic in the medical community, even though there are clear guidelines for care. The parent then has to have difficult conversations with the school about providing a supportive environment, which is an uphill battle often because school is either apathetic or in some cases hostile. Then the parent and child begin to create a network of other parents of trans kids for support, and things begin to seem like they're falling in place. And this is a best case scenario. And then soon after, they learn that they could be arrested because the governor thinks that they are abusing their child. The child worries that they will be pulled from care that is a source of joy and solace in their life, and they are worried that the few adults who have actually listened to them and cared for them could be arrested for the act of caring for them. And now they must become not only the experts of human anatomy and advocacy, but they also must become experts in the law. And this is just to exist. So make no mistake, these laws and policies are not about protecting children, they are about eradicating trans people. These laws target the children who actually have supportive families in their life, which is not the case for most of these kids. And so what does this mean for us and for our larger faith? Well, being an intellectual and rational religion, I think our first instinct is to get goaded into an argument with those who wish to turn our trans siblings into an ideology. But I think the first step is that we don't debate that we don't debate their existence and their worth. Our first principle as UUs is that we respect the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Full stop. It's not a debate. It's not an ideology. It is a child with worth and dignity. It's a child who deserves to be treated with integrity, and we do that by listening to them, by taking them seriously, and by loving them into being. The second step is that all of us will eventually know a trans person or a family with a trans child. Heck, y'all know me. It behooves us to self-educate. Trans kids, their guardians, trans adults, their spouses, have to educate just about everyone they interact with. And just meeting folks who have the basic groundwork in place makes the world feel a little less lonely. Too often, we are fixated on whether we did it right, but protecting our moral integrity can sometimes get in the way of actually doing it right. There's a lot of caretaking that many trans folks and their families do, even with the most well-meaning allies. So just remember, if you think you did something wrong by mistake, like misgendered a person, the best thing you can do is briefly acknowledge and then do better next time. Then actually do better next time. And the third step implicates privilege. Too often, privilege is used as a cudgel against would-be allies, and this makes folks try to shed their privilege, but that helps no one. We are all a mismatch of different privileges and lacks of privilege. I'm trans, I read that way when I walk down the street, and as such, cis folks have a privilege that I do not. But I'm also white, I'm also middle class, I'm an adult, I have access to this microphone and to this video feed. Discerning our privilege enables us to leverage it to lift those up who lack that privilege, even when it does nothing to take away from where we lack privilege. And finally, I think that we should hold space for trans kids. I don't think of prayer as a way of calling on that great goddess in the sky to intervene on my behalf, but as a way to invest our full attention, if only for a moment, on someone else. In this world, our attention is valuable, so give it to those who need it most. Let their voices call to us because by the time they have found them, they've already captured the bravest parts of themselves. Ours is a religion that listens to the oppressed. Be ours a religion who actively holds the space for them, who cancels out the other noise and holds them in arms of loving care. May it be so, and amen. I invite you to join me in the words of Extinguishing the Chalice. They're on the screen. We extinguish the flame, but may the light of truth, the warmth of love, and the energy of action burn bright in our hearts until we are together again.